Hello everyone. Today we are going to read about the cell theory by me, Dr. Aprajita Rao. For those who have not listened to my earlier lecture, I strongly recommend please go and do so. In the last lecture, we studied about the scientists who discovered cell and about their various microscopes. We also studied about Mr. Louis Pasteur and how he threw away the theory of spontaneous generation. Today, also we'll study about a few scientists, starting with Mr. Robert Brown. Mr. Robert Brown was a botanist by profession. Who is a botanist? He's a person who studies and works on plants. So while he was studying on the epidermis of orchids, he found an opaque spot and he called this opaque spot as areola. Earlier also scientists saw the spot, but they thought it might not be that significant, so that they pay attention on it. But Mr. Brown said that this spot was not limited to just the epidermis. This is a histological section of the epidermis of a plant, and this is that spot right here. He saw the same spot in an early stage pollen formation. So he thought because it is present in all the cells, maybe it is a key component of cells. And he called them nucleus, and that term is still being used today. So I think we should hold that term in the memory right now because it is still being used today, nucleus. And he even gave the credit to this person, Mr. Franz Baer. I think Mr. Robert Brown was really modest to do so. Then came Mr. Matthias Schleiden. He was a German botanist, and while doing his work, he wrote Contributions to Phytogenesis in 1838, in which he stated that the different parts of a plant organism are composed of cell. He saw these cells under the microscope and finally came to conclusion that every part of a plant has cells and every plant has cells. This back then was known as the old cell theory. Then came Mr. Theodor Schwann. He was a German zoologist. Who is a zoologist? It is a person who works on animals. So he was studying on a notochord development in tadpoles, and he was very good with microscopes. What he found out, he named a research paper Conformity in Structure and Growth Between Animals and Plants in 1839. And why he did so? Because he found similar structures to what Mr. Schleiden saw in 1838. And he said that even animals have the same cells. So then, after seeing all these cells, both animals and plants, that is all living things, have cells was proven. So then Mr. Schleiden and Mr. Schwann were credited as the founders of cell theory in 1839. And back then the old cell theory has 2 points. First being all living things are made up of cell, and second being cells are the basic units of structure and function in an organism. After that, Mr. Rudolf Virchow came into light, and he said a very famous aphorism, omnis cellula e cellula. It was done in 1855. He was a very famous doctor and a very big politician. He even founded 2 pathologies, that is cellular pathology and comparative pathology. Now what's that? So, you might think that whenever you get sick, you go to the doctor and the doctor tells you, go and get your blood tested. You see all those pathology labs. So he was responsible for that field. He actually found out how disease is occurring. So I must say that he was very intelligent. He also said that like animals give rise to their offsprings, so to have a new animal, we need an old animal. Similarly, cells give rise to new cells. So to have new cells, we need old cells. Like I've already told you that he said that disease is caused by changes in normal cells, and this field was cellular pathology. So when he was seeing under his microscope, he saw that all the other cells have a single nucleus, but one particular cell had two nucleuses. He thought, why is that so? Later on, he saw that these separated, and finally, the cell also separated. So then he found out these are formed by the division of a single cell. That means all cells come from other living cells. Now the cell theory was modified in 1855. First point was the same, that all organisms are composed of one or more cells. Second was also the same, that the cell is the basic unit of life in all living things. But the third new added point was new cells are produced from pre-existing cells. But then biology is a science and evolution is the concept that makes biology unique. Every single day we find out something new. So today the modern cell theory, it has 4 statements additional to the original 3 statements. That is in overall 7 statements. So the additional 4 statements were that the cell contains a hereditary information which is passed on from cell to cell during cell division. That is the genetic material. This is why we look like our parents, our grandparents. The next point was all cells are basically the same in chemical composition and metabolic activities. This we'll deal about in the future lectures. Third was that all basic chemical and physiological functions are carried out inside the cells. Every cell is capable of making its own food. Every cell is capable of excreting the waste. So all these functions were done by cells. And last, it was the extension of this cell, that all cells, the activities they do is because of subcellular structures within the cell. That is the organelles. What are organelles? Again, we'll read in the future lectures. Now, they found some exceptions to cell theory. First and most important being virus. They said virus was not a cell. Why? Because virus was composed of 2 chemicals. First being this protein coat right here, and second being the nucleic acid. Nucleic acid can either be DNA or it can be RNA. And like other cells, virus has no membranes, no nucleus and no protoplasm. Virus has a very interesting thing. When it is outside in the world, it is dead. And as soon as it enters the host's body, that is the organism, all of a sudden it is miraculously alive and it starts to reproduce, which a thing can only do when it is alive. So now they got confused. It is not composed of cells, but it is still alive and it is still reproducing. How it still has a genetic material? Other exceptions were mitochondria and chloroplasts. They are organelles which we'll read about in the future lectures, and they can reproduce inside the cells and even have genetic material. Few more were viroids, virusoids, prions, and coinocytic algae like Vaucheria and many fungi. Don't go crazy after all these names. It is way out of your syllabus. You should just know that things like this exists, and we'll study about these in the later classes. So now, why are we studying so much about cell theory? Why is it so important? Because like I said, science is ever advancing and there's so much we don't know about it. So the first question that arises is, could there be an organism that does not contain a single cell? Or might there be some other fundamental unit of life, at least in some cases, just like virus? Maybe whatever we are going on reading and telling from the past 400 years, maybe it is just a part truth or maybe completely false. Are the life processes sufficient criteria to distinguish between the living and the non-living? So a few of you listening to this lecture can brainstorm about it and maybe in the future become scientists and find something new and bless biology. And don't forget me then. So now this completes our cell theory, and we'll get back to you very soon with the next lecture. Till then, keep watching Edupedia World. Stay tuned. Enjoy.